Hello, hello. Thanks, Mr. Magoo. How's everyone doing? Hey, Sapphire, Nyx, Rhiannon, Journey. The gang's all here. Hey, Architect. What's happening? Welcome in here. Happy Thursday. How are you doing? As always, we're working on Digital Iliad here. Well, I shouldn't say always, but we're working on our isometric FTL-like in Godot. Right now, we're working on the cutaway system, which is the system that determines how to cut away parts of the ship to look inside other parts of the ship, which is a problem we have because we have a 3D game that we render in 2D. I mean, technically, we'd still have this problem if it was a 3D game rendered in 3D. Excuse me. I just scarfed my breakfast. I've been waiting too late to have breakfast. It's kind of okay because it means I get to have a nice big cup of coffee with my stream here. Ooh, Sapphire, you watched the first 2 episodes of Babylon 5 here before the stream. Now, did you watch The Gathering or did you watch first 2 episodes of season 1? It's different. It's different. Go watch The Gathering. But I'm glad I influenced you. I hope you like it. It's kind of crufty and it very 90s, but it's probably one of the best space operas ever written. So, and it's not without humor. It's not this big serious affair like Dune or, you know, whatever, Battlestar Galactica. It's like pretty humorous while still being a very hard-hitting, very well-written show. Watch The Gathering first. Yeah. That's kind of like almost like a pilot kind of deal. You'll have to go back. You don't have to. I think The Gathering is technically classified as a Babylon 5 movie. And it's kind of confusing because you don't have to watch it first. It's fine. Honestly, I might go back after season 1 and watch The Gathering is what I would probably personally do. Once you've met a few of the characters, because otherwise you're like, what's happening? So sorry. I've been having a little bit of a runny nose in the morning here. It's been cold. It's California cold. Let's be clear. It's been California cold. Not real cold, but I'm a fragile California flower. Yeah, I hope your meetings couldn't have been emails. We need some kind of thing that we can say, like a blessing, like a remote work blessing of may your meetings be emails. Oh, whoa, Nick's hitting the 25 stream streak. That's like 5 weeks, assuming I stream 5 times a week, which I don't. But that's impressive. That's quite a streak you got there. All right, so we did this yesterday. We rewrote the cutaway interior function. It kind of worked, but it illustrates a problem that we have. I can show the problem now that I'm confident we're not going to hard crash anything. Look, it's not a measuring competition, but I do see Sapphire as a 28 and Magoo's an 18. I'm impressed. I mean, no one's going to beat my stream streak. Just saying. My stream streak is at, 281, 282. It's actually more than that, but, It's not a competition, but if it was, I would win. You're watching it on Tubi and you don't think you're finding The Gathering? Don't worry about The Gathering. Forget I said it. It's actually, The Gathering will make more sense after you've seen a little bit of the show. So don't worry about it. The Babylon 5 movies are totally extraneous. They're good, but they're extraneous to the story. It'll just provide additional context for stuff that they're going to explain to you anyway throughout the course of the show. So here's the problem with the cutaway. Watch this. Notice how the roof isn't being removed. Oh, there's an additional problem here, which is that I made a double thick wall. Is the exterior cutaway working just fine? Yeah, it is. All right, I totally messed this up. But yeah, watch what happens here. Oh no, it doesn't think this is okay. I totally butchered this. I like put a hole in it and I can't see where the hole is because the cutaway isn't working. Let's try that again. So I make just a super simple 2-level surface. Like this. Do you see what's going on there? Well, for one thing, the auto tiler isn't working correctly along one axis, but that's beside the point. Watch how it's not cutting away. Well, for one thing, it's cutting away too many of the walls, which is not great. But the more important thing it's doing is it's not removing the ceiling because it doesn't consider the ceiling to be in the way. Because the ceiling doesn't belong to it's one level up and it doesn't belong to a compartment. And that raises an interesting question. Or it raises a rather boring question with interesting consequences. Stop showing off, Dave. Yeah, sorry. Rhiannon, oh, you got your Twitch recap. This is your most watched channel at 119 hours. I am very touched. That's, I'm not worthy. You think it's safe to say that you're sucked into Babylon 5? Excellent. I'm glad to hear that. It's truly good. If you invest in it, the character development that happens in that show is better than almost anywhere else. Like, there's good character development that happens in Star Trek, but they almost never call back to it, you know? Like, Miles O'Brien or you know, Picard will have, like, some crazy life-altering experience, and in the next episode, they just don't talk about it. At one point, they said, like, Miles is like, I don't know if someone's talking to Miles, and they're like, I don't know if you'll ever be the same again, and then the next episode, he's just fine. Babylon 5 is good about not doing that. Babylon 5 has, like, real, like, these characters... I'm not going to say too much, but the writing is so good and the character development is so good. Yeah, you really don't need the movies. The movies are like, people were upset that they only got, you know, so much Babylon 5. The movies were meant, the Babylon 5 movies are like, they actually just made an animated movie that I haven't seen. They only made it a few years ago. They brought everyone back, like the main character you haven't met yet because they're not in the show yet. Nix, what about the people who are double watching? Oh, both of you on YouTube and Twitch. They'd have twice as much as me. Yeah, that's a good point to make. No spoilers. Yeah, exactly. I'll leave off. We'll talk about it later, once you've seen more of it. But I'm glad it's available on Tubi for you to watch. I have it all on DVD. One of the few shows I have all of. I actually don't think I have the movies. Maybe I do have the movies. I'll have to check. Anyway, so we have this problem where a wall remembers what two rooms it separates, but a ceiling or a floor doesn't remember what rooms it separates. Because we don't really think about it in those terms. But that's causing a bit of a problem. I have to decide how I want to deal with that. Yeah, I hope everyone is having a good Thursday here. Again, may your meetings be emails. Is the blessing I offer. Inspired by Rhiannon Journey's workday here. I have some meetings today, but they're my favorite kind of meeting, which is the kind of meeting that I don't have to speak at. I'm just there. I'm just one of the talking heads, just kind of floating, but I'm not a talking head. I'm just one of the picture windows just floating. Those are the best meetings. It is until like someone asks you a question and it becomes very obvious whether you were paying attention or not. Then they become the worst meetings. Best case scenario, you hit them with a no updates from me. No blockers on my end. If it isn't clear, I've started listening to the stand-up podcast, so I'm like learning all these. I'm learning what it is to be a programmer. You know, a programmer that someone gets paid to program and the things they say. I'm gonna fake it till I make it. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, what are we gonna do about this ceiling problem? I like that walls know what room they separate. Technically, we might have that same... I don't know if we're going to have that same problem with ceiling stuff, because if, like... Maybe we do have that problem. But how do we deal with that problem? Because a floor isn't its own block. A floor is just part of the block that it's in. And I like that for a lot of reasons. There's a lot of reasons why I like having a block be like this space, and a block may have like a floor or a wall or whatever in it. But it does mean the problem that it's hard to represent vertical barriers with it. There's a way I could represent this with like a vector or something, but I don't want to do that. I think the fields are the correct way to do that. Rhiannon, you need a flashcard deck to practice scripts for situations like that. Yeah. You need to, it's important to develop the skill of saying something satisfactory while not saying anything at all. This is where things like alignment, synergies, value adds. Let's circle back on getting alignment from the stakeholders, you know? I think that's important. See how I suggested the course of action without knowing anything about what we were talking about? All right. Yeah, I'm not sure how I want to tackle this. It's interesting that this has never been a problem before. We need some way of recording adjacency between blocks. And we need some way of recording vertical adjacency as well as horizontal adjacency. The only real question is whether we need to... whether we need to know the directionality of that adjacency, right? It's the only real question. And if we do, then that's when we need a vector, and that's a lot of space to take up. Something that could just be a bit field. I don't know how I solved this before. I think what we did before is we just aggressively cut away all Z levels above the Z level that you're currently looking at. And you know, that's not a terrible solution. It's not my preferred solution because I would consider that over-culling. Like you get to, it means you would very rarely get to see parts of your ship because it would just be culling away everything all the time. I don't like that, but I'm not quite sure how to achieve anything else. Apologies for any coffee slurping sounds. The coffee is very good and it is very hot. But would it be the most usable in game to see more, to be able to see more? Yes. And that is the conundrum. The only reason I'm not just like, well, not the only reason, but another reason I'm not just willing to do that is because I'm thinking about the flood fill. Part of the reason why a block needs to know what rooms, what it connects, is that it needs that if you have a hull breach, you need to know how that hull breach moves. But maybe we don't actually need to know that per, well, we probably do need to know that per block because depending on where the hull breach is, it probably impacts different rooms. Like a breach in a wall is very different than a breach in a floor. So a block would need to know what room is below it because a block holds a floor, not a ceiling. So maybe it's as simple as telling a block where its floor leads to. That's the simple way to do this. And how would we do that? It would be during the flood fill step. The challenge of that means that blocks would have room assignments that aren't actually part of the room. But that's okay. I think that's what we want to do. I think we want to tell a block what room is beneath it. Because actually that's super important. You could imagine, well, you can't imagine that. Well, I could imagine it, but it's not relevant. So let's start with that. Let's maybe start with that. The trick is that would come into play during the exterior. Oh, that's why this won't work. So, because if we think of the example that is the problem we have currently, which is that the ceiling, the top deck, quote unquote, which is outside of the ship, doesn't know that it needs to get out of the way of the room beneath it. I kind of want a flood fill solution to this rather than just a pure cutaway solution because I do want to think about how we'll handle the transfer of gases. I am also kind of annoyed at this auto tiling error that we've got here. But that should be easy to find because it's only affecting one side. But yeah, how do we tell these blocks that they belong to the floor beneath it? I don't think we can unless we do it retroactively. So like after these blocks have been processed, when you're processing these blocks, it'll actually look up and potentially imprint that room ID onto this. This also might affect how we render. I'm also thinking about how we render rooms that are multiple blocks high, like a cargo bay or something. Hmm. Nix, your headset cable decided to break. You had to order a new one. Good thing you always have a backup one. That is a good thing. Yeah, headset cables are definitely the weak link. The one on my headphones right now is very finicky, and it's finicky down at the other end, down at the end that connects to the computer. And it just cuts out, and it's been like that for years. And it cuts out if it gets into a bad position. It's pretty annoying. I should just replace it, frankly. But I'm a little lazy. So the way we would do this, so if we look at the interior flood fill, so the exterior flood fill is not terribly helpful. Exterior flood fill we can't really change. But is there a way to hook this into the interior flood fill? We can get rid of this function. Look at these code comments that I wrote. Disgusting. I know. There's a couple of reasons why I did this. One, I wrote this after the system was done. And two, nothing about this function tells us what it's doing. I'm making up for a failure of the code, because like you'll notice that what I'm commenting on is describing what Z level we're iterating through. But I guess you can see it here, plus Z, minus Z. But it's just one little line that you might not otherwise notice. So, I don't know. I don't like this. But I did it. Past me did it, and I'm not gonna... I'll respect that for now. Nix, thankfully with your... Mies? Is that a brand? I'm a Sennheiser boy. All my headphones are Sennheisers. I was hardcore back in the day when they had, I don't know if they still do this, but they'd sell multiple kinds of Sennheiser headsets, and some of them were cheap, quote unquote cheap. And under the hood, they'd be the exact same equipment, and Sennheiser would just add a muffling pad to the headphones to make them worse. So you could literally buy the cheaper headset and remove the muffling pads, and then you just have good headphones. It's crazy. It was cheaper for them to just manufacture the same headphone and then make it worse on purpose. So, I don't know. That's maybe not the best corporate move in terms of, you know, me trying to sell you on a brand, but I don't know if they still do that. Are you feeling all right? You're seeing comments? I know. This is past Dave. This is the Dave from a long time ago. I actually don't know when we wrote the flood fill system originally, but it would have been a long time ago. The more foolish Dave, the more naive Dave from a previous era. Mies is a brand. That's almost exactly what Mies does as well, except the difference is only the outside. Huh. Oh, I see. They use like paneling and other stuff to like sell you on the premium nature of the headphone. I guess that's fine. I honestly prefer that to... Like, that's one of those things. It's like how people hate pay to win, but they don't really hate cosmetic microtransactions. Because it's like, yeah, if you want to spend $5 on horse armor, who cares? But if you're spending $5 on the sword of +1 to kill that guy, people get upset with that. So, I don't know. I think for consistency's sake, I have to be okay with that. For purely superficial cosmetic differences. Brandon, you remember when Intel was making a CPU that if you taped over or disabled some pins, you could get the performance of the more expensive model? Yeah, I hate that. I think that still happens today, but I think they do it to meet the requirements of like export controls, you know? Big nonsensical export controls. All right, so how are we going to do this? How can we do this retroactively with the interior flood fill? I think this is going to be tough. Oh, there's a stack. I forgot about this. It's just a LIFO queue, isn't it? I haven't used a stack in a while. What namespace is this in? Oh, just system collections. Okay. So, visited, add adjacent. Oh, this is going to be super hard to do. Actually, maybe it's not. How do we do this? We do this additively, right? So what we do is we assign an index each time we iterate through, each time we do an interior flood fill. So we do the exterior flood fill, so we're guaranteed to remove all the blocks that are on the exterior of the object. We designate that as outer space, quote unquote. And then we pick a point in the volume that was not in the exterior flood fill, and that becomes the start of an interior search. And so what we could do is we could just look up and add the blocks above us to the room below us. I think that's going to cause some problems in the long run doing it that way, because now you can't actually tell what is part of a room. Or you have a harder time telling what is part of a room. I guess if the count of your block rooms is 1, then you know that it's outside because it only has one room that it's a part of, so it's necessarily outside. I guess we could do that. And then, yeah, this is, so we say this. Index remove, index equals 0. Interior flood fill. Well, hold on. Where do we actually write the block rooms? Or do we actually flip the field? Rooms. We do it inside the rooms. Rooms. Index equals rooms.getIndex. Rooms.span. Index equals rooms.span. Index.set room index. This is terrible. Rooms.set coords room index. Rooms span index room set. Index equals rooms.get. Why is this twice? Oh, because we set it and then we don't do anything else. I see. Huh. Wonder if there's a different way to do this. Makes more sense. I mean, I know there is, but so there's a reason why we could have done this another way. There's a reason why I have a wall know which of the two rooms it's next to and consider itself as belonging to both of them. And I do it for cutaway reasons, because otherwise, if a wall doesn't think it's part of either room, then when you mouse over the wall, the cutaway system doesn't know what to do. So you have to make it belong to some set of rooms. And so it makes sense that it belongs to both. But it's a lot harder to make that determination for a floor or a ceiling, because we don't treat a floor or a ceiling as like a separate thing, which we could do. We could do that. I would rather not. I'd rather not do that. You can always set it as a flag if it's a ceiling or a floor. Well, it's not either or. It's each block has a floor. Or does or doesn't, but a block might have a floor. We call it a deck. And so the workaround I'm imagining is if we do the same thing we do with the wall, then if you look at a block, it'll belong to either... If you look at a block that doesn't have a wall, it will belong to 1 or 2 rooms. If it belongs to 1 room, we know it's outside. If it belongs to 2 rooms, we know it's inside and there's another room below it. Oh, no. Okay, so we don't know it's outside if it just has 1 room, because what if it's the room at the bottom of the ship? Yeah, so how do you distinguish between a floor that's a boundary between rooms and a floor that's in its own room? You can't really do it with just that one field. It becomes ambiguous. Is it okay that it's ambiguous? Maybe. Because of how we handled the cutaway. This solution seems better in terms of how you would want to manage like oxygen or gases moving through a ship in the case of like a deck plate gets blown up. And so now these 2 rooms are connected where they used to not be. Because the system knows they're connected. What if the cutaway looks down? What if when we look at a block and we decide whether it's cut away, we actually look below that block? What if we do that instead? Because the way we do a cutaway right now is we look at the layer that the player is clicking on and we work our way up. But what if instead we start at the top and work our way down? Is that a way of handling this without doing the thing I'm describing? It doesn't solve the problem of like gas transforms throughout the ship, like, or gas movement throughout the ship. I think eventually we'd want to have some kind of like flow field to handle that. Could floors and ceilings be shared by the blocks? Then what do you do about the block? So then you have an every other problem. So right now it's simple because the wall, quote unquote, what I call the bulk, which is just the midpoint space where like a wall might be, or a person, or a console or whatever. The space you move through, which is the upper segment. There's an upper segment, which is the bulk, and a lower segment, which is a floor. If you try to include a floor and a ceiling, then you would have an every other problem, right? Because you'd have one block that's got a floor and a ceiling and another block that has neither, and then another block that has both. So maybe the simple thing to do would be to have two different arrays. You have one array for all of the bulks and another array for all of the decks. And the bulks handle horizontal movement and the decks handle vertical movement. You could even use the same coordinate system for both. Just think of them differently. That's not a bad idea, but it would require a pretty comprehensive rewrite And I'm not 100% sure if that's exactly what we want. There is some merit to storing them separately. So right now we have like block forms and block rooms. Instead, what we could have instead is like block bulks and block decks and actually store them as separate arrays. It's a little wasteful in terms of memory, but it would make handling these representations a lot easier. It would be a pretty major change to the way we think about the space, though. But it would make it really easy to do things like, oh, this floor is gone, so now these two rooms are connected now in terms of like flood fill. I'm trying to think of ways that would be an issue in terms of interleaving these things. It would mean there would be a lot of cases where you're looking at both the bulks and the decks. Because right now what we have is we just have a block, which could be occupied by one or more things. And that's nice. It's nice to have that. It's kind of wasteful to just double the memory footprint of that for just this purpose, but it might be the thing we have to do. This is the sort of thing I should really think through more thoroughly and like design around, but I don't like to do that. I don't like to front load the design for stuff like this because I'm never able to like preemptively understand all the interactions. I much prefer to just try something and then see what happens. So yeah, like here we have a lot of checks where we're like, does this block have either of these things? Actually, this check is totally extraneous. But there's a lot of times where we're checking both. It's an interesting question. Because the players don't move through quote-unquote deck space. They move through bulk space. Like they move through, they're considered part of the upper segment of a block. And so if they're running around, they're in that segment. So it kind of makes sense to treat those differently. And all you would ever do for the deck is if the deck is like a hatch or something, or if it's empty, then someone could move through it. We could actually make a lot of stuff implicit. Instead of having to like look at a block and tell whether it's totally solid or not. Like a deck could either have a plate or a hatch, or it could be empty. And a bulk could either have a wall or a door. Or not. This is tempting. It's tempting to think of it in on these terms. You would make a lot of things more straightforward. But yeah, it is more involved in terms of memory. And it does mean there's a lot of times where we would bring in multiple buffers. Because we're like, if you're pathfinding, you need to know about whether there's a deck plate. We could still have a block. We could still have block data, I guess, in terms of like we could consult both and then like write it out to like a pathfinding thing or something. So we're not always having to check both. And I have this rooms field because I guess you could store up to 4. You could connect up to 4 rooms. which actually means we're being kind of wasteful using a whole byte, or not a whole byte, a whole bit field 64 to store room connections if there can't ever be more than 4 connections. Could actually use something half that size. Let me look at that for a second. That's interesting. That's an interesting thought. Bit field 64, because the bit field 64 is a U long. Could actually use a smaller bit field for this purpose. Random Journey, could you still have blocks that hold a reference to the externally stored bulk and deck ceiling? You wouldn't need to, because they'd be indexed to exactly the same in the coordinate system. So we have like an implicit coordinate system because everything gets put into a 3D volume. And the indexes in that volume are the coordinates. So we don't actually store, you know, like vector 3s or anything anywhere for a block, because it's just thought of as the index into that volume. I won't ignore you, even if you're not making sense. I might ignore Nyx when Nyx is not making sense. Random Journey, do you have an idea of the max size of the ship that you could estimate the max memory usage for storing all of this info? We have a max supported... You know I'm playing, Nyx. We do have a max supported size of ship. Right now the max supported size is somewhere in these constants that I should move. Right now I think the max size that we support is 64 by 64 by 8. And that's super arbitrary. The only reason we chose that is well, the 8 was I think reasonable because a ship I think tends to be longer and wider than it is tall. But that is not true. That's just kind of one of those spaceships are modeled after naval ships, so they just kind of have the characteristic of like a boat. So they tend to be longer or wider than they all are tall, but I don't think that actually matters because aerodynamics don't matter in space to much of an extent. I mean, technically there is like a medium you're moving through, but ships just tend to be longer than they are. So if anything, we could actually do something else. We could do something like we could have a ship be like, well, I guess I want to support something like a Millennium Falcon style thing. But yeah, I don't know. We have a max. We have a max supported size. It could be 64 by 64 by 64, but that's quadruple the size of what we currently support. And honestly, that's bigger than probably most ships that I would design. We need to keep in mind like the Shigeru Miyamoto axiom of like a good design decision solves multiple problems. We need to keep that in mind if we want to think about doing something like this, because this has consequences. It honestly has less consequences than I would have imagined thinking about it, because we already split the tile map layers. So each block has 9 tile map layers, 10 if you count doors. Because it has the XYZ for each deck plate, it has the XYZ for the lower half of the bulk, and it has the XYZ for the upper half of the bulk. So we've already split these for that. Begs the question of whether you would also want to split the bulk into upper and lower segments. They're not the same size though, right? Like a half a bulk plate is not the size of a deck plate. It could be, but it's not. We could do crazy stuff if we actually... there's crazy stuff we could do if we actually split them all up. If we changed our concept of what a block was. Like if we made a deck plate and a bulk the same size, or half a bulk the same size, or maybe even a third of a bulk. I don't know. We could do a number of things here. We could even use a vector 4 instead of a vector 3 to refer to them. Like we could break up a block into like 4 pieces or something like that. I don't think that sort of thing makes sense. There's some cool stuff we could do if we made it more homogenized like that. Like you could have rooms that are on different levels than each other. Like instead of having the levels be flat and then you go up to the next level and those levels are all on the same level, you could have like offset levels. It'd be a lot easier to have things like ramps up to like half levels and stuff if you treated them all the same as just a space that you move through. So like a character would be like 3 blocks tall. And the 4th block would be like the ground underneath their feet. And so like, let's say a character tried to move through a space that's only 1 block tall. Well, then they'd start crawling. Or if they tried to move through a space that was 2 blocks tall, they would start crouch walking. Like, there's actually some really interesting stuff that we could do if we change the way we think about blocks. Instead of doing the interleaved, like you have decks and you have bulks, what if instead of that, because right now we just have one big block and the block has like sub-segments, but we only ever think about the block in its one form. That is really interesting. Yeah. What does it make more difficult? I don't know. Hopefully I explained it. I've actually thought about it for a long time. I've thought about how I would do things like ramps, and things like ramps would be really hard to do otherwise, but it would actually be kind of neat. Maybe we open A Sprite and we think about this stuff. That would open up a whole lot more options for shipbuilding. It would make the components real complex. Are you already back from the store, Sapphire? That was quick. I know you said BRB real quick, but oh, Warp 9 by Harris Heller. That's nice. All right, you're relieved. Go to the store. Go get some Twiglets. Or whatever people get at the store. I'm super interested in this idea now. Let's maybe diagram this out a little bit. I think this is an interesting idea. Ramps would be really nice for smaller ships that you would have in lo-fi. Yeah. I also have been thinking about things like moving through vents, and I was thinking about how to handle those as special cases. And I'm also kind of not pleased with the partial bulk cutaway. It's too high. Like breaking a bulk just into 2 pieces is not enough. It's like it hides too much of the floor panel behind it. So let's diagram some of this stuff out. Well, first we'll look at what we currently have. And then we'll look at what we are considering. So let's do the simple thing to do first would be to just draw out what we've got. This is one of the many reasons why I don't have, you know, to-do lists. Because I'll all of a sudden think of something where I'm like, oh, that would be a cool thing to do. It would involve completely rewriting the fundamental building blocks of the game. But if that's what the game needs, you know, who am I to argue? So here's like, and a current block is broken up into a number of pieces. I'm going to use like dotted lines for this. I don't think this is right. I actually need to look somewhere else. Not this one. That's so hard to look at. This one. Well, if we do this, rip our tileset atlas source. But this is game dev. Like, I really think people need to understand how this works, which is that if you don't want to do something like 8 times, don't do game dev. Okay, so the bottom floor is 9 pixels tall. So I'm just going to draw this again. That's what I'm going to do. Okay, so here's a floor plate. I think this block is actually not the right size. Nix, you think that's true just in general for programming? You're ready to do and redo the exact same thing multiple times? I think that is true to an extent, but I think in like traditional programming, I think it's a lot easier to know the thing you're trying to build at the end. Like, I don't think people who are making banking software are like, I think you get a list of requirements when you start and you meet the requirements. And yeah, maybe there's iteration in terms of how do we meet the requirements, but I think in only game development and maybe in a few other fields, but I think mainly in game development I think the requirements are so fluid and so vague that you really do end up doing a lot more iteration in terms of like, where are we even going? Requirements always change. I guess you're right. That is one of the only constants of programming. You're not wrong. Okay, I'll give it to you. You are making sense. But I do think there are some areas where waterfall, quote unquote, waterfall development works. Game development is not one of them. I don't think anyone has ever done a waterfall development with game dev. Or if they have, they're making something they've already made before. Okay, so it's 13 pixels for the bulk, for just part of the bulk. That goes up to there. Okay. 13. Okay, so this is a bulk. Even with waterfall programming, people love to change something fundamental about the dang program when it's almost done. Yeah, maybe this is a more human, more about human tendencies than it is about like anything else. Okay, so here's the bulk. Here's the lower bulk, what I would call the lower bulk. And then there is also an upper bulk. Is the upper bulk the same size? It should be, right? It's just somewhere else. Yeah. Let's move all of this down. I undersized this block. Oh, maybe this is the size of a bulk. 13. 13. 13. That's my Rome joke. Just too high by 1 pixel. All right, so let's look at this. So this is the deck. This is the lower half of the bulk. This is the upper half of the bulk. Wouldn't it be neat if these were, if we actually did this? Well, let's look at what we have, what we currently have. I'm gonna take all of these and I'm gonna stack them. So we're gonna do this. We'll put this over here. We'll do this. Put this here. So I'm gonna erase these and turn the divisions into dotted lines. And then we'll add this to it. I think this is a really interesting idea, what we're thinking of. Because here's something that's really hard to represent in a tile system, in any tile system, are objects that take up more than one tile. There's a reason Dwarf Fortress does not support that. There is a reason why a baby takes up 1 tile space and a dragon takes up 1 tile space. Regardless of how big the Forgotten Beast is, it still just shows up as 1 little tile, right? There's good reason for that. So this is our current process here, right? This is currently what we have. So we've got like a deck plate. Here, I could even write this. We could even document these. Is this how I draw C's, or are C's like this? No, they're like that, of course. How do I draw a K? Lowercase k. It doesn't look right. Maybe it's like that. I actually need to look at my alphabet. DI font block. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, okay, it's like that. Okay, so this is a deck plate. shorter than that, isn't it? No. Hey, Magoo. See you soon. Take it easy, Magoo. I appreciate you coming around here. I know you're busy. Appreciate you stopping by. Good luck with the OS dev. And yeah, I'll see you soon. Okay, so here's our deck plate. I'm going to bother to write this because I can reuse this. I should probably save this, though. We'll call this block experiments. I don't know. Block composition. Oh, I should probably put these in here. Well, it looks like we're going to have another, you know, fairly unproductive day here. But I think this is an important thing to think about. And honestly, this is why we work on things this way. There's a lot of people who are like, Dave, what are you doing? Why are you going so crazy on this tool, on this block editing tool? And it's like, well, we're answering some pretty fundamental questions. And if I had just started messing around, maybe I would have figured this stuff out sooner, because I'd been like, man, it sucks to have people run around here. Like, we need something else to figure out how to handle movement. But it's like, this worked too, because we had a bunch of major problems with the cutaway system and the flood pill system. They weren't even major problems. They're minor problems, but they suggest a fundamental flaw in the way we compose these things. And that's I like having these more philosophical streams where we just kind of think about, what are we doing? What do we want to do? What would be better for the game in the long term? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is this really how I write a capital U? Oh no, okay. I'm like pretty good at knowing how I write stuff, but I always have to check. Like this. Yep. Don't make your own font, your own typeface, people. Don't do it. Don't be like me. Yeah. Well, this is all too low. Also, this isn't the upper or anything. That's over here. These kinds of streams are important. You have to explore the problem space. You'll hire me to make it for you. Yeah, don't do that. I'm not. Yeah, I think it was this year, but maybe it was last year. I went to a talk at GDC on like typefaces in games, and like one of the first things the lady giving the talk was like, don't make your own. Like, and I was like, oh, too late. Although it is helpful. I use it kind of everywhere. I don't know if I like this B. It's capital B. I don't like that. Shouldn't it be the opposite though? like that easier. Okay, I can see why. Excuse me. I can see why I ended up here. Ooh, look how bad that is. I gotta add some more space between these. Sapphire, anything exciting happen while you're gone? No. We're diagramming. We're going to compare the current way we structure and compose a block to maybe a new idea we have that's more homogeneous. How was the store? Get some tasty snacks. Did you get enough to share with the whole class? Oops. What was I just writing there? I started writing full and then I switched to writing bulk. And I ended up writing bulk. Funny. All right. So this is the current composition of a bulk, right? There's a deck plate, a lower bulk, an upper bulk, and then the full bulk is all three together, right? And notice the vertical. Notice the overlaps between the vertical components, which arguably I should stop doing. We should see if we can find an excuse to stop doing this. I couldn't figure out a way of getting the bulks to tessellate without a vertical overlap. Rhiannon Journey, one of your first bosses was a graphic designer, and when agonized forever about font choices, you learned and forgot so much about fonts. It's never made you never want to actually make one. There's a lot. There's a lot. I don't know anything about typefaces. Like I don't recognize any by name. I have a book on pixel art fonts. Super cool book. I've never read it. I've like skimmed it from time to time. I should really go in and read it. But it has a lot of historical and older. It has a lot of arcade era and like early pixel art era fonts in it. It's a super cool book. One of the coolest books I've never read. It's on the list of things that I should study more and then don't. Like I have Celia Hoden's book on UI. I know she has like 3 books on UI. I have one of her books on UI. Never read it. Or UI UX. I guess she's more of a UX designer, but super smart lady. I've seen a few of her talks. All right. So here's the current setup. Here's what we do now. So we have the deck plate, the lower bulk, the upper bulk. We refer to the whole bulk as a thing, and we refer to these individual forms within that. So like, I'm going to actually make one more thing here. Just to illustrate what we're doing. Oh, I needed to copy that. Yeah, I love doing this. I know most of the work I do, it's like we have these brief moments of like realization, and then we spend so much time like following through on them to finish exploring them. I want to show that this is a door. The easiest way to do that would be to just draw the door section on it, right? Except I don't remember how we separate out a door. I should just look. Show me a single door for 500. If we end up redoing all this stuff, I think it'll actually be time for doing a full project folder reorganization. Because while I'm good at like deleting old code in my scripts, I am notoriously bad about deleting old assets in the project folder. I'm like terrified of doing it. I'll type doors. So how do I do this? So you start there. You go down 5 pixels. And then you... Okay. Okay. Okie doke. And then we just do like this. So I'm doing this to illustrate a point here. Oh, I deleted the lower wall. God. Okay. Okay, there we go. Creating a journey, your boss was also expecting pixel perfect layouts in Internet Explorer 6 and Safari in like 2005 compared to their Photoshop files. It's hell to do. You're a digital hoarder in the worst sense. I'm luckily not, but I could see how one would become such. I at a certain point I accepted that nothing digital lasts. I mean nothing lasts, but especially nothing digital lasts, and I was just like, that disabused me of that pretty quickly. So I lose stuff all the time and I don't sweat it anymore. Let's say x-axis door. What do I do for this? That was almost very questionable. I think the eye is too tall. Oh, that's 4 tall. Yeah, the eyes are super tall the way I've done them. Yeah, maybe that's okay. Here's what I'm really not pleased with about my design is my S's. How do I do an S again? Is it like this? This pixel font falls apart when it tries to do a lowercase s. It's still readable because the brain is pretty good. It helps when you do the shading. It helps when you do the shading. When you flip it and you look like this, because then at least they touch. Like this is a pretty readable S in context, but it looks not good when you do it like this. Can you tell I'm trying my hardest to like avoid doing actual work this week? I'm like, hey, let's rethink the entire way we organize blocks. It'll be fun. Okay, so the point I'm trying to make with this illustration of the x-axis door is that a door is a compound object, right? A door consists of both a lower bulk and an upper bulk. So we already have some support for compound objects. But technically, I don't consider these objects to take up more than one tile because we really, from a rendering standpoint, we have these 3 different pieces. But from an organizational standpoint, we only refer to this. We only index into this. And these are aspects of this full bulk. And this is what I'm thinking is, what if we changed this? What if all of a sudden there was no concept of a full bulk? I mean, there still could be. We could still easily do it, and we could do it in one of 2 ways. We could either change our vector 3 coordinate system to be vector 4, and the W axis could be like, which of the 4 segments do you have? But I actually kind of don't think that's necessary. And I think not doing that would actually be very beneficial. So the thing I'm tempted to do is do something like because right now the quote unquote first class citizen is the full bulk. And the components of that full bulk are like implementation details. But what if we made these individual segments the primary building block? Like, the thing I'm thinking about is, can we make one of these that's split into 4 pieces? Not as written here. Well, maybe. Is there a way to do this where each of these pieces are the same size? Because if each of these pieces were the same size, then there's actually no distinction between a deck and a bulk, which is great because I hate the term bulk. I'd still probably use it, but it would be interesting if this quote-unquote full block was actually just a combination of other pieces. And then we can do all these things we talked about, or we can say, like, maybe you have an engineering room. Like, imagine, I know it's hard to imagine because nobody watched this show, but imagine like the engineering room from Enterprise, not the ship, the show. Also the ship, but the show. They had like this super weird engine room where like Trip, the engineer, would be up on this raised platform in the middle of the room, which is where the warp core was. And it was like this little area in the middle of the reactor room, and it was like up on this like ramp that you would go up to. That would be really hard to do with the current system we have, especially if we have ramps. Because a room has like a natural level, and then the next natural level is 1 level higher, and we think of that as like a block for a room. It's been a long road. It really has, hasn't it? I would be okay never hearing that song again. Man, they did that show bad, huh? That show had to drown so that Discovery could swim. So that Strange New Worlds could run. I don't know. It did. Yeah. Yeah. Enterprise was it was both a reaffirmation and a rejection of like everything that came before, and it was so awkward. I actually kind of like that show. I don't hate it. Let's be clear. I don't hate Enterprise. I do hate that intro. That intro That intro was so bad. We live in a world where Enterprise got 4 seasons, but Firefly only got 1, you know? You know what I'm saying? Is that a just world? Probably not. Actually, Enterprise came together pretty strongly in its 4th season. Did Enterprise get more than 4 seasons? The Xindi War was pretty dope when they actually decided to start doing like a serialized story. That was pretty dope. Rhiannon Journey. So you would have a deck plate, and then the room space would consist of 3 other deck plate sized pieces. You don't hate any Star Trek show? I don't either. I definitely have a spectrum of which ones I like. But it's all Star Trek. That's the thing. That's the thing people don't get when they read about the Flame Wars and they argue about what is and isn't Star Trek. You have to make a distinction between movie Star Trek and TV show Star Trek. Star Trek in the movies is a very different thing. But in terms of the TV shows, it's all Star Trek. And the very things people hate about Discovery and whatever it is some of the most Star Trek parts about that show. People are crazy. People are weird. I'm not going to get on my soapbox about that, but so what I want to do, Rhiannon Journey, is I want the thing you described, which is there's a deck plate and then there's room space, which is traditionally 3 deck plates, the 3 deck plate spaces above the deck plate. I want that to be part of the domain knowledge. I don't actually want that to be hard written anywhere. Like, I want that to be an implementation detail. Because like we're saying, like, yeah, a full-sized room would have 3 empty spaces above the deck plate, and that would be enough room for a character to walk around. But let's say you only had 2 empty spaces above the deck plate. Then it's like, that's crouching space, and then a character that tries to move through that would need to crouch. And if you had a vent, which is a special kind of room, you know, if you had a vent, like let's say you were crawling through a Jeffries tube, that's only 1 space above the deck plate, and there the character would crawl, like army crawl through. And that's all like implicit in the design. It's not like a hard characteristic that a room needs to have 3 empty spaces above a deck plate. And removing that hard assumption would free us up to do so many things. That would be pretty good. It's gonna be a crap ton of animations to draw with different clothings and stuff. Yes and no. My stick figure-y style is simple enough that I can reuse almost all of that. It depends on how smart I end up being about creating the art, but these characters are so simple. Depends on how but you're not wrong, Nix. You're not wrong. But 2D animation is an incredibly hard thing to do in any case. Unless you do something neat, like you're doing like palette swap stuff, or like, I think there's some stuff we could do to reduce the workload. I am planning on not supporting any other body types than this body type at first, the like basic humanoid body type. I'm gonna avoid implementing, but again, this system would make it easy. So like, let's say you have like a Gorn, and like a Gorn wants to have 4 empty spaces, right? Maybe a Gorn needs 4 spaces to be able to walk around. So maybe if they're walking around on in your regular corridors, maybe they have to like stoop. Like maybe they're huge and they kind of bend over and like kind of stoop through the areas. I don't know. I think there's some really interesting stuff you could do. But yeah, the animation workload of this game is going to be pretty big, kind of no matter how you slice it. I do like this idea because it moves us away from the ISA part of ECS, or data-oriented design. Part of the way of that kind of composition is you want to move away from defining things as this thing is this. A is a B or whatever. You want to define it as this has this. Like that's the difference between a defined object class and like an entity with components. Is like, and I'm thinking of this in an affordance standpoint. So like our current system is that a room is this tall. This is a room. A room has a defined set of dimensions. But if we change to this other system, a room has a headroom. Like a certain space would just have a given headroom, and it actually might vary over the course of the room. And I think that's super flexible in the long run. It allows for some really odd shaped rooms, which is probably incredibly realistic. It would also allow you to like move between machinery, do a lot of interesting things that way. It would also make destruction kind of interesting. Like you could probably crawl through rubble or whatever, or over rubble. You're gonna be heading out, Sapphire. You do plan on watching more B5. That's good to hear. I hope you enjoy it. Rihanna Journey, you don't know if you're the angel or the devil on your shoulder, but this sounds like a good direction. Yeah, I think the problem is that I think in the long run, this is the angelic choice, but in the short run term, this is going to be a devilish refactor here. I think it's good though. I think it does ultimately reduce complexity because it makes less assumptions about the space. Here's my problem though. Can this space be broken up into 4 segments of equal size? And I think the answer is no, but let's try it. I'm pretty sure the answer is no. So we might have the problem of we need to make a different. We need to choose a different basic building block size, which is not a problem. We just need to be conscious about our character proportions and the work that we've already done on that. But let's see if we can get something that seems acceptable and that actually is technically correct. Yeah, this is going to be kind of hard to do. So this would need to be here. So I guess first what we do is we bisect it. This is a clean bisect. And as long as we can bisect this again, then we're golden. And I think we can. 7. Okay, no. Easy. Super easy. Barely an inconvenience. This goes to show I never have any idea what's actually hard and what's easy about what I'm trying to do. All right, well, GG. We can do it. It can be done. We can break a block up into 4 equal segments. That's fascinating. Another year of editor building? Let's hope not. Wait, are we making design decisions? Yeah, we are, Arneo. Hey, A the Ant, I see you over there. I saw you dab your way into the chat. Sorry, I didn't mention it earlier, but I see you. How's it going? Happy Thursday. We're making some decisions. I'm kind of feeling giddy about this. This is a pretty exciting idea, I think. I think the consequences of implementing this is going to be kind of a pain, but I'm excited about the possibilities here. This is also part of, if it isn't obvious, I've been rereading data-oriented design, but part of data-oriented design is removing the problem space or the domain from the object itself and relying on it to like help with your processing of things. But yeah, if we remove this concept of a block as being this, there's a floor and there's a set amount of empty space above the floor, which may or may not be filled. If we get rid of this complement of a block, I should actually have written this as block and not bulk. Yeah, if we remove the idea of a block as being a hard thing, like a specific thing with a specific dimension, and it becomes an emergent property of the system, that is good for us. Because yeah, right now a full block could have a deck plate, a lower bulk, an upper bulk. It might have a thing that consists of multiple pieces of this, like an access door, like a door piece. And instead, a block is an emergent property, or a block isn't an emergent property anymore. It's just a thing that can arise. Well, that is an emergent property, but it's not even a concept. Like we wouldn't even think of 4 blocks as a thing. We would, the pathfinding system would, maybe not the pathfinding. Yeah, not the pathfinding system. The pathfinding system, the animation system, they would look at a room that had, you know, limited headroom and be like, oh, you have to move a certain way through this room. You either have to crouch or you have to crawl. You like this? All caps? Yeah, that's how I'm feeling. Cough, cough, episode 512. Nix. You're killing me. Episode 512 is like 2 years away. Give me a break. Actually, it's probably more of like a year and a half away. We'll have a whole different set of problems. It looks great, but like we'll never be done. Which you may or may not be against. I don't know, because this might make things easier in the long run. That's the point, right? The point is that we're trying to front load this work. A the Ant, you're currently hyperfixating on a game idea. That's what I want to hear. Rihanna Journey, you need to read data-oriented design. You watched a video of someone other than me talking about building a custom data-oriented ECS for Godot, and they referenced the book. It was also in C#. Send me that video. Come on. Yeah, but just go to data-orientedDesignBook.com. He says not having, no, that's not it. Don't go there. Don't do that. What is it called? What's the website called? Oh, it's just data-orienteddesign.com. There's a free copy of the book at data-orienteddesign.com/dodbook. I'll drop a link. It's free. There is a hardcover copy of it. I would recommend it. The book is not actually about entity component systems. I think he says the word entity component system once in the whole book. It's actually kind of interesting. It's not a book about entity component systems, which is kind of neat. It's actually a book about how to move from an object-oriented way of thinking to a data-oriented design way of thinking, which I actually think is more helpful. It just happens to be, if you make that transition, an aspect of that transition, an aspect of that movement could look like an entity component system. It doesn't have to, but it could. It could. But yeah, I want to see that video. Put it in the Discord or something, or just drop it in chat if you can find it. It was actually a C style, C++. That's okay. That's okay. Honestly, if you're going to make an entity component system, you should not write it in C#. C# is not the correct language for an entity component system. An entity component system should not be written in a garbage collected language, in a managed language. I mean, it can. We've done it, but it's not great. Arneo, what is the major difference here? Before we had like top part and floor, so we would go from 2 parts to 4 parts. Yes, and so the difference before the difference is between explicit and organic or emergent characteristics. So the current system that we have is that this is a block. A block is this defined space. A block might have a deck plate on the bottom. It might have a bulk that is on the upper part. If it doesn't have a bulk, then it's an empty space that you could walk across, right? Because it's got a floor. If it doesn't have a floor, it's just a totally empty space. But this was like a fixed size object, and this was the dimension of it. What we're thinking about moving to is we're thinking about having, I should probably draw it out a little bit. We're thinking about having just a single size block that's this size, slightly smaller than the current deck plate. And so if you were to build this explicit block, it would be made out of these 4 blocks. But it's not. So we're basically we're shortening. I don't know what the right word is. We're reducing the size of the basic building block to remove that presumption of a block being a floor and stuff above it. Instead, a block is just this small thing. And so it's not explicitly this thing that's bigger. I'm having a hard time explaining it. But we're basically moving down to a smaller component as the basic building block. And we're moving away from explicitly affording this larger building block that has these multiple messy aspects to it of like, oh, a block may or may not have a floor. It may or may not have an upper segment. Instead of that, we just have, is a block filled or is it not? If it's filled, it's a solid thing and you can't move through it. If it's not, it isn't a solid thing and you can move through it. And then so a space that you can move through, it becomes an emergent property rather than being a thing that's hard-coded of what a block is. Moving to smaller Lego pieces. That's a good way of thinking about it. It's like using, instead of using a combination of Lego pieces to define your basic building block, we're moving down to just having a single Lego piece as our basic building block. Rihanna Journey, you've been thinking about messing around with FryFlow, which is C#. Ooh, I haven't seen that. Let me bookmark this for later here. Data-oriented component system in Godot. Oh, this is only from 5 months ago. I need to open my other. Can I do this in a way that doesn't just like? Yeah, okay, there we go. I need to mark this to watch this after the stream. I want to watch this video. Save for later. There we go. I'm watching that. That looks good. And then this other thing, you've been looking at FryFlow. I don't know if I looked at this when I was building my ECS. I looked at a few different ECSs that people had written. I don't think I looked at FryFlow. Among the various C# ECS projects, it is currently the only one implemented in managed C#. By this, no use of unsafe code preventing crashes due to memory corruption. We have a bit of unsafe code, I think. Not a lot, but just a little bit for type stuff. Just a little bit. We don't actually do most of our own memory management. Wow, this has C++ REST level speed and memory efficiency. Only ECS core concepts, components, tags. We need to implement tags. We don't have a tag system, and I want a tag system. Ooh, they implement relations. We also need to consider implementing entity relations, which is actually really easy to do if you have tags, I think, in systems. Wow, is there no concept of like queries and stuff? Or buffers? This looks really interesting. Oh, they reference Arch ECS. I've never used that. I should study this one. This looks really smart. Okay, so they do have a search method. Relationships is interesting. I kind of want to look at how they develop their entity relationships. Oh, relations to add multiple components, quote unquote, of the same type to a single entity. I think this is kind of like a buffer system, but I think instead of having a buffer of just totally unrelated data or of data that's stored directly in the buffer, I think they have a buffer that are references to other entities. I'll have to look at how they implement that. That's kind of big shout out to Fennec or Fen ECS and Flex. Flex is the good one. Rhiannon Journey. It's written in C++ or C and C++. Flex is the GOAT. The creator, Sander Mertens, I read a lot of their blogs. I didn't implement hardly any of what they did. Their entity component system is incredible. Their entity component system can treat other entities as components, which is a lot like an entity relationship. But there's stuff that they do that I just didn't want to do. Mainly because I'm not making an engine, so I don't need to have like a dynamic. I don't need the ability to add new component types at runtime. That's not something I need to be able to support. It might be something I want to support in the long run in terms of mod support, but Flex is dope. I've never heard of Fen ECS. Sorry, we're totally off. We've totally just fallen off and I don't even know what we're doing at this point. I've never heard of Fen ECS. Tiny, high energy ECS. Oh, it's named after the Fennec Fox or something? That's cute. Oh, Fen ECS, Fennex. That's cute. Yeah, this has a bunch of stuff that I don't feel like I need, like separate worlds, things like that. Interested in how they approach some of this stuff. It's cool that you can do this with C# nowadays. C# lets you do a lot of neat tricks. Oh, someone wrote Flex in .NET. Of course they did. Wow, there's a lot of C# ECS approaches. Yeah, I should dig into some of this stuff. I've tried to not go too hard on developing the ECS or over-developing the ECS, but I do want to spin it off into a plugin just so that I can work on it separately. Or so it's not so tightly coupled with the specific implementation of this game. But yeah, we should do more on that. Man, there's a lot of interesting consequences of doing it this way. Kind of want to reorganize my diagram here. So in the current version, this is a block. A block is a compound thing that consists of multiple other things. In our new conception of the world, in our brave new world, do I have a selection? Is there a reason I can't? Oh, I have I see. In our brave new world, a block is going to be much smaller and much simpler to reason about. So in our brave new world here, this is a block. You'll have to check out his blog. Yeah, if you read one blog on entity component systems, read the Sander Mertens blog. Arneo, it sounds better. Simplifying and breaking things down is usually the right direction. You can't quite imagine the consequences for that. Your brain's scrambled and you're tired. You should eat and sleep. You should do those things. No, but we're taking things that are explicitly defined, that are very inflexible, because they're like, it's the affordances we're giving to ourselves, right? Because what prompted this whole discussion is the fact that I was having a hard time with the cutaway system, because right now, this concept of a block, it has a floor piece, it has the deck plate, but it doesn't know about what's above it because it has no ceiling piece. The ceiling piece is the floor piece of the block above it. But if you do this system, then it's super simple. It isn't like, look at this block, does it have a floor? Does it have a bulk? You just say, is this block occupied? Is the thing that occupies it solid? Those are like the only two things you have to know. And then if there's a character that's of compound block size, so a crew member would be 3 blocks tall when walking fully upright. That character just needs to know how it needs to. It can exist in a block of any size. Well, sort of. It becomes a block as defined. I know I've said this already, but this kind of a block, this like a floor with some empty space, aka a room, a floor with empty space above it and walls on all sides. Rooms become these emergent properties much more easily, and it lets us do all sorts of fun stuff. Like you can have, for us right now, deck plates are a fixed length from other deck plates. So like if we had a room with a deck plate, the only way to have like an offset deck plate that was higher up would be to move to the next deck level. So it would be like very strict. But if we have this system, then you could have like gradual ramps. You could have like a cargo bay that has like multiple levels on it that are at like different offsets. You could do a bunch of different stuff. Reasoning about the space is going to become harder because you can't make as many assumptions about it, because there aren't as many concepts baked into the basic building block. Whereas like the current building block, there's a lot of concepts baked into it, which is nice because it creates affordances for us, but it's also not nice as it kind of ties our hands, right? Because if the concept is not baked into the building block, we maybe can't do something because it contradicts that or something, right? So yeah, I think this is good. I think it's neat. So what would have been in a room in the old model, let me try to get this aligned here. I guess it's either or. There's no real clean. Guess this is better. I don't like it as much. better. So what would be the, you know, the hard-coded full block here becomes an implicit, the block stack here is an implicit object, right? It's not a real thing. The full block is the real thing. And this thing is just a stack. I think this is neat. I think we're going to try this. There's a lot of things that need to change to make this happen. Like the spatial design of the ship is now tactical too. Yeah, because there'll be choke points and like issues of like you could work your way around through a series of vents, right? But you know you need to crawl, so you move slower. Or maybe you're like trying to work your way around some kind of like an engine space, and it's like you have to crouch to move through there. So it's like not as bad as crawling. So yeah, there will be a lot more thought around building a space and moving through that space. Arena Journey, you like the idea that it can open up different character sizes. Like a large enemy might have to crouch, move slower to get through a ship made for a medium-sized player. I think that would be neat. Yeah, it also means we could also just give a little extra headroom, right? Because right now, a block is... So our current concept of a block is a deck plate and 2 bulk pieces, and it's a fixed size, right? But in the new model, you could have a room or a hallway, and you could just make it a little bigger. Like, for a character to move comfortably through a hallway, it just needs to have 3 blocks of empty space. It would need 1 block for the floor, and then 3 blocks of empty space above it. But you could, there's no reason it has to be 3 blocks. You could make it 4. And then, yeah, maybe there's a creature or a piece of machinery or a robot or something, like a combat robot that's like 4 blocks tall. And maybe the combat robot like can't comfortably move through certain rooms or whatever. Like, yeah, it's really neat. I think the potential for emergent properties is really interesting. Arkaros, it'd be cool to have a crawl space of height 1 under an entire ship. Yeah, or throughout the ship. Like Jeffrey's tubes in Star Trek, right? Like, I think that's interesting. And I was struggling to think about how we would implement that with our old system. Because there's no real way to do it except to say, like, maybe the lower bulk is empty. But we don't really have an upper bulk only. Like, we don't really have that concept. This is a concept for rendering purposes, but it's not really an organizational concept. And welcome to the chat. I appreciate you coming in and hanging out and participating. I hope you're having a great Thursday. We're about to head into ads, so I want to get that out of the way in case you get caught up in the ads. Arneo, so the cutaway system basically just determines what color the sides are to denote whether it's a wall or floor, outside, inside, etc. So with this, you just need to know, are the 3 visible sides occupied by a bulk to determine the color. The color, it's kind of the other way around. The color is just a representation of whether it's an outside, what I call an outside hull piece, which is a piece that's exposed to vacuum, the vacuum of outer space, or a middle hull piece, which is a hull piece that has another object flush against it. So like a series of blocks that make up a wall. And then the inner hull space is a hull piece that opens up to an interior room. So a room that's sealed off from outer space. Right now, the color is the way we represent that. So yeah, in the new system, it would be similar because a face of a block would either be, you know, an outer hull piece, an inner hull piece, a middle hull piece. And what's nice about this is it's, you don't have to worry about like composites, right? Or compound hull types on the same bulk. Well, you do, but not in the same face. So yeah, I think this will be neat. I think this will be good in a lot of ways. What are the things we need to change to make this happen? Is a good question that I'm not prepared to answer. Hey, Jacob Dev, how's it going? Welcome in. Oh, my coffee's dying. I'm gonna try to drink the rest of this. It's like almost room temperature. All right, so what do we need to change to implement this? So yeah, we're kind of flipping it on its head, right? So like in the old way of doing things up here, which I guess I could like create a thing around them. So in this old way of doing things, move this down. In the old way, this is the first class citizen, right? This is the full block. And the building blocks of it are aspects of that full block. So this is the thing that we talk about and we reason about. This is the building block of our thought. And then these are just aspects of it. They're subcomponents of it. When we're flipping that concept on its head down here, because we're making this the fundamental building block, the individual piece. And then something like a block stack is an emergent property of a combination of blocks. I think that's neat. I think we're going to enjoy this. I should work on this diagram to explain this better, but I don't actually want to do that. But yeah, we're kind of tackling head on a hard thing from tile-based games, which is how do you represent something that takes up more than one block? So we've got this as our fundamental building block, right? But like, what do you do for a door? A door is going to be 3 of these pieces. Or it might be more. It'd be 3 or more of these pieces as a door. So we have to think about that. How we represent something that necessarily takes up more than one block, but I think we can do that. We were going to have that problem anyway, because I already have doors that take up more than one block. We'll just have a volume component, probably. Or something, I don't know. Reworking the tiling stuff? Yeah, Jacob, we're rethinking our basic building block. We're trying to break it up to make it easier to reason about. You would imagine there would be more Z levels? Yes, there are going to be a bunch of Z levels now. So instead of 64 by 64 by 8, 8 being the number of Z levels that we support, because a Z level is even across an entire deck, or a deck is a Z level. And so all of the rooms along a deck would be at the same height, but this other system would allow us to do different things. You know the bridges from like Star Wars, right? Where you have like guys working down in pits and then you have like walkways above those pits. We could do stuff like that now. Super easily. We could even do things where like this. Here's a good example. This thing that I drew here, which is like the command crew in the middle of the room are on this slightly elevated deck plate. I literally can't do this currently. This is impossible for me to do currently. This cannot exist in the game as it's currently coded. I can't do, or even, the Enterprise D has those, it has like a sloped bridge, right? Because the back section is like higher up than the lower section, and it's kind of mitigated, or it's not mitigated, it's smoothed out along the sides, so you can you walk up to the sections at the back of the bridge. We could do something like that too now. We could have ramps. Moving across a ramp might still be a little awkward, but it's a lot easier. This is a much more manageable problem. So yeah, how many Z levels do we want to support then? 8 times 4 be 32. I mean, I kind of am tempted to say we just quadruple the number of Z levels that we support, so that it's now 64 by 64 by 32. Because I do think we should restrict the height of the ship more so than the horizontal parts of the ship. If for no other reason than, you know, a monitor is wider than it is tall. A monitor is about twice as wide as it is tall, right? Not quite. I think in the same sense, we do want the ships to be generally wider than they are tall. And I think restricting that on a 2-to-1 is pretty reasonable. It's pretty reasonable. So yeah, maybe we change the max supported block volume or the max size of a block volume for a ship. Maybe we make it 64 by 64 by 32. Because currently it's 64 by 64 by 8. But to get a 1-to-1 relationship, we need to quadruple that. Arneo, you have a million questions. How do you do outside versus inside in this new system versus the old system? Exactly the same. I can tell you exactly how we do inside versus outside. And it would work exactly the same. Our flood fill system has 2 passes. Yeah, this part isn't going to change, and it's actually going to get easier. Because part of the reason that prompted this was the fact that I can't tell. It's hard for me to tell whether where a block's vertical neighbors. There was no way to do that before, but we can totally do that now. So the way our flood fill system works, we do this compartmentalize. We start by doing an exterior flood fill. The exterior flood fill basically works from the outside in. So we pick a point that we know is outside the buildable area, right? Actually, what I do is I add all points that are outside the buildable area or something like that. I look around the outside edges of the buildable volume and work our way in. And we flood fill all that. And so anywhere that we can reach, because we stop when we hit a solid object, anywhere we can reach from that first flood fill that goes on the outside in, those are all the places that are included in the exterior of the ship, right? And so once that's done, if there are any points left, as in if we didn't fully search the entire volume, if there's any points left in the volume that we didn't reach, we start a new search from that point. And we do another flood fill and we work our way in. But now we're working from the inside out. And we try to, see how far we can get from this one point on the inside that wasn't reached during the exterior flood fill. I call these interior flood fills. And each one of those flood fills is a new room. And we just repeat that process until until you've searched every single point in the volume. And then because each time you increment an index each time you do an interior flood fill. You pick a new point and you do another flood fill. You pick a point that you haven't already reached, do another flood fill. And that way we both know what is inside and what is outside, and we actually know which inside points are connected to the other inside points. So this part actually is going to get easier, which is good. It's going to probably take longer because we're going to be searching more points. We're searching about 4 times as many points. But we have this on its own thread, so that shouldn't be a problem. We have the flood fill on its own thread. So hopefully that answers one of your million questions, and you only have 900,000 some odd questions left. What have you been working on, Jacob? If you're still hanging around. How have you been? I know we're deep into the holiday time. I took a week off last week, and I've probably got another week off coming up around Christmas. Work has been crazy. I've been having a hard time being productive outside of, my day job. It's a tough time. It's a tough time of year to get anything done. Except for, making food and eating food. So the real thing that's going to change is this block forms. This block forms concept is very different because we no longer just have a block that has these aspects of the block either has a deck or it has a bulk. Actually, we're kind of doing the opposite a little bit. I know I said we want to move from is-a relationships to has-a relationships, but in this case, we actually are going the opposite way, because now a block is so small that it can only really be one thing at a time. So we actually might not need a, well, for one thing, we might just want to know whether a block is solid or not. That's an easy thing. Is a block solid or is it not? Hopefully there's a way of storing that information that doesn't require just a massive 3D array of booleans. I don't really want that. There's probably a way to do that. There's probably a way to do that without that. Might require some creative indexing. We might actually make chunks. I'm tempted to make like I'm tempted to make 8 by 8 by 8 chunks that we work in from a storage standpoint. Because if we do 8 by 8 by 8 chunks, then we could store simple Boolean values just as a bit flag. So you have a byte that's like, oh, actually, if I use a really big field like a ulong or something, can we make it? Let me think about this for a second. Yeah, if I use a ulong, I could actually make a kind of complicated bit field volume thing that was 64 units wide. And that would be 64 by 64 by 64. We could actually use that as a bit mask system. There's some interesting stuff we could do here. Maybe I do allow 64 by 64 by 64 to try to encourage verticality, you know? Because I actually want to encourage verticality in this game. Because that's kind of one of the selling points of the game, is it's like you actually have a ship with like levels and stuff. Jacob, yeah, you're just hanging out. Doing day job, lurking. Looking forward to the holiday time off also. Yeah, hell yeah. Carry on. Man, there's some really interesting possibilities here. I'm having a shape of a problem doesn't start anywhere kind of moment, where I have this big shape of this new thing we can try, and I'm not quite sure where to start. The obvious starting point would be the tool system. The tool system is going to need a very strong prefab system, because instead of a floor plate or a wall plate or a door plate being, you know, a quote-unquote first-class citizen, it's actually going to be a combination of other blocks. So we're going to need a really robust like prefab system where you're like, and we'll hard code a bunch of them, as in like I'll have some default ones, like a floor will be just one plate that just gets put exactly where your cursor is, and then a wall is actually 3 or more plates put on top of that. So maybe there's actually like a kind of accretion. Maybe I need to have a system where you can select, well, you can already select many like arrays of blocks or you know, lines of blocks or whatever. So maybe I need like a click drag way of like letting you could like place one block and then like click drag it up and it becomes like 4, and then you could click drag that out and it becomes like a wall of like 4 by whatever's. We'll have to rethink the building tool, which is actually going to be a good opportunity to switch from a hard-coded Z level to a raycast input style, where it like casts a ray from the camera to your cursor and it tries to hit the first block. and then you select that, and whatever you do is something that's on top of that. And if you scroll through it, it'll try to scroll through to whatever the next thing is. Mr. Generic Official, damn, 281 episodes. One Piece better watch out. Welcome in, thank you. Yeah, we're on episode 281 of Digital Iliad. We're making an FTL-like in Godot, a kind of isometric 2D FTL-like. That's actually 3D, which is kind of what we're talking about here. We're thinking of a somewhat different way to handle our building blocks. Start at the beginning, yep. Alcaraz, not sure if Godot has typing, but you like to start by modifying types in the direction of the changes you want to make. How much is that in real time? Let's see. I would say on average our streams are about 2 hours. Nowadays I try to do it for 3, but I don't always get there. So but when I first started, our streams were only like 1 or 2 hours. So we're increasing the length of each individual episode. But I think for a conservative estimate of how much on-stream time we've been working on it, and just multiply by 2, I think is safe. So we've been working on it on stream for at least, 500 something hours, probably closer to 600 hours. And, we're still just getting started. And that's game development. It's taken us about almost just short of 2 years to get to this point. So, but when you look at 600 hours, that's like a full-time person works about 2,000 hours in a year. So we've only gotten to do, a few months worth of effort. We haven't even gotten to do 1 year's worth of full-time work on this game. So I really need to up the hours count. And I do work on this offline. I don't solely develop this game online or on stream. Can you see what I got so far? It's pretty broken right now. So kind of. If you want to see what I got so far, I would say check out some VODs. Because we're on the cusp of a major rework. I can kind of talk to you about what we're thinking. It's not going to make any sense, but at the moment, the way we've previously thought about the game is we have these things that we call blocks, which is like a 3D, you can say voxel. I wouldn't say voxel, but you can say voxel if that makes it easier. And a full block has a number of components. It has a floor plate or deck plate, and it has these what I call bulk sections, which is you could think of as a wall. So it has up to 2 wall pieces. It has a lower piece and an upper piece. And so if you have like a door is like the 2 bulk pieces, and it's this door that opens, right? And this was the building block that we were working on, was this whole block, which has, different aspects. But we're actually thinking about moving to a different system, which is represented down here, where there's just one homogeneous block piece, which is very small. And to build something like what we used to call a full block is actually a stack of 4 of these other pieces. So if you wanted to build a solid wall, you would stack 4 of these blocks on top of each other or something, right? And it's nice because it removes a lot of the constraints of the old system. But we're thinking about what needs to happen to move over to this other system, which is a lot more implicit. A lot of the characteristics that we just assume, like what's a floor piece versus a wall piece, a lot of that hard assumption goes away. And the difference between a floor piece and a wall piece is like an emergent. A wall piece is just a piece on top of another piece, right? I just got my 10-minute warning. I have a hard stop at 2. So let's pontificate on this a little more, and then I think I'm gonna have to think on it overnight. I have a co-working session later today. I was gonna do business stuff, but I think I'm gonna think about this. Think about the direction of our changes. This is exciting. It's also concerning, because a lot of stuff is going to need to change. So much for being done with the editor tool soon. I think this is going to be good. I think this is going to be really good. I'm honestly embarrassed that that we didn't do it this way from the start. You're really hyped about this? Me too, me too. My mind is a raging torrent filled of rivulets of thought, careening through a sea of possibility. Rhiannon Journey, you just fixed Y sorting in your game. Not sure how you broke it, and you're honestly not sure how you fixed it. That sounds like a classic game dev problem. You want more questions out of your 1 million? Shoot, if I can answer it in 5 minutes or less, that would be excellent. Cause let's chat for the remainder of this stream, which is about the next 5 or 6 minutes. My partner has a meeting. We compete for airspace sometimes. She's nice in that she tolerates me yapping for like 3 hours to seemingly no one. It means I have to be good. And when she needs the room, I need to be able to relinquish it. So yeah, let's chat this out a little more, because I'm already thinking about everything that needs to change. The tool system needs to change. The flood fill system needs to change. The cutaway system obviously needs to change. Well, maybe the cutaway system doesn't need to change as much, because the cutaway system wants to work on the level of the compartment, which is the sealed interior space, or a sealed interior space, which I actually think is going to be a lot easier to do with this system, because it's a lot more explicit whether a space is sealed or not. What I should write down is my idea for the bit masked block volume. If I can actually do that in a 64 by 64 by 64 volume, if I can just represent that with a series of U-long bit fields. Like, I'd use the U-long bit field to represent one row, and then we would just stack it volumetrically. That actually should be pretty easy. It would actually be very compact. I mean, it would only let us store simple values like yes or no, but that's pretty great if we can do that. It's pretty good. Arneo, would doors be like a type of block and then adjacent doors could combine somehow? Or are you planning on making doors a block that's several building blocks tall, wide? So yeah, that's the kind of thing that we need to think about. Because anything that takes up more than one block is this compound thing. Including a character, like a crew member is gonna take up more than one block's worth of space if they're standing up, right? So we have to think about how we want to handle that. That's one of the more open questions, is how are you going to handle something like a door? Because we already have doors that are multiple blocks of size, right? Like we have doors that are 1 block size. We have doors that are 2 blocks wide. We have doors that are 3 blocks wide. I've even designed doors that are 3 blocks wide and 2 blocks tall. This kind of opens up that space significantly. Hey, Ronnie the Zombie, welcome in. You're kind of coming in at the end here, but I appreciate you. Hope you're having a great day. I'm kind of doing a little Q&A stuff here right at the end. I got a hard stop at 2 o'clock, which is about 5 minutes away, so. Rhiannon Journey, you were watching someone who plays TTRPGs online talk about how gracious their partner is to sit 5 feet away and listen to them do silly voices for hours on end. Yeah. There's a lot of very patient content creator partners here. Significant others. It takes a lot of patience to be with someone who just kind of yells in an empty room for hours a day at seemingly no one. And it's appreciated. you know. Similarly, I appreciate you all for hanging out and being on the other end of my constant yapping. Yeah, I gotta wrap this up now. This is super exciting. I'm sorry we didn't really get anything done, but I think we have a very exciting direction to work on the rest of the week here. Where else would we be? That's a great question. Thanks for the stream. Thank you, Jacob. I appreciate everyone who hangs out, who lurks. I'm just gonna wrap it up. We're not gonna raid. I gotta wrap. But yeah, we'll be back tomorrow. So yeah, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.
Maximum warp.